Hello and welcome to the Beef Edge, the Teagasc Beef Podcast, for all your latest news, information and advice for Irish beef farmers. I'm Catherine Egan and this is the monthly Grass10 update with Grass10 advisor Niamh Doyle to discuss grassland management tips for the month ahead. Niamh, you're very welcome. The month of September was cool and dry overall, but there was wide variety across the regions over the month. Currently, what covers of grass are there on farms across the country?
So grass supply is behind target on most farms, and there was, huge variation between especially the south and the north. But if we look at pasture-based Ireland data, average farm cover is around 800 kilos of dry mash per hectare on dry stock farms. Growth at the moment is equal or less than demand, and therefore some farms are eating more than what they can grow. Pre-grazing yield then on most farms is around 1,600 kilos of dry matter per hectare, but should be around 2,000 kilos of dry matter per hectare for this time of year. The aim for these farms is to hold farm cover for the next 4 to 5 weeks.
Based on the figures there you mentioned, Niamh, what can farmers do that are behind on grass supply?
There are various options farmers can take to reduce demand on farm depending on their system. So forward animals or animals to be finished can be housed, assuming the farm has adequate silage stock. And this then will give younger stock the opportunity to graze into November or December, depending on weather conditions. Trade is also good at the moment for cattle, so there is an option to sell culls or non-priority animals. Then if you want to keep animals out grazing, maybe introduce silage or supplement. We are seeing actually on some farms that calves are being weaned earlier and cows are being dried off indoors. And if grass supply improves, these cows will be let out to graze after the calves. Allow calves creep graze ahead of cows then to break the bond, and this will allow calves access to better quality grass. It's important to prioritise young cattle for the last rotation, as autumn grass is more beneficial to a growing animal.
In terms of weather, Niamh, we've seen huge variability across the country. The northwest has been dry and there has been wetter conditions in the east and south. How will that impact closing paddocks on farms in the coming weeks?
Yeah, I suppose closing paddocks is influenced by ground conditions. However, paddock choice during closing is critical. To start grazing next spring, some of the drier paddocks that have good grazing infrastructure with good roadways and plenty of access and exit points will need to be targeted. So these paddocks will be closed mid-October to ensure medium covers of 800 to 1,200 kilos of dry mash per hectare to start grazing next spring. Weather conditions are largely good for the week, so try and graze off some of the more difficult, heavier soil type paddocks on your farm. 50 to 60% of the farm should be closed by the 1st of November to ensure adequate supply of grass for spring 2025. And 2/3 of grass available in spring does come from what grows up to Christmas. So start closing from next week onwards, starting with paddocks close to the yard, with good shelter to ensure a good cover will be on these paddocks for grazing in early February. And remember, once paddock is closed, it's closed. And for those then who may be short of silage and tempted to graze on, if ground conditions are good, this will lower grass available in the spring. The feeding value of spring grass is 2 kilos per livestock, higher than autumn grass. So essentially you would need an extra 2 kilos of meal with autumn grass to get the same value as spring grass. If we reduce average farm cover too low, in autumn, grass supply will be compromised in the spring. So aim for a closing cover greater than 700 kilos of dry mash per hectare on the 1st of December.
Looking at the week ahead, Niamh, what grass growth and grazing conditions are expected?
So grass growth predictions for the week ahead are between 40 and 45 kilos of dry mash per hectare. South and east is expecting heavy rainfall of between 50 and 80 millimetres for the next 7 days. However, other parts of the country will receive less rainfall of between 10 and 20 millimetres.
You mentioned there the closing targets, Niamh. Oversown or reseeded clover paddocks, what's advice when it comes to them versus normal perennial ryegrass swards that you mentioned?
So I suppose oversown or reseeded paddocks with white clover should be closed at the end of October or start of November. If you close these paddocks too early, it will leave a heavy cover of grass over the winter, resulting in the younger clover being smothered out. Similarly then, it's important to not leave a heavy cover over the winter on red clover paddocks. As ground conditions are dry at the moment, it may be a good opportunity to graze red clover fields, depending on when your third cut was taken. However, if grazing red clover, be mindful of bloat, as clover tends to be quite high. Options then to reduce bloat include adding bloat oil to water, adding a fibre source, and giving 24-hour breaks. Where then red clover paddocks can't be grazed, for example on an outblock, consider cutting these for a forced cut silage or zero grazing to reduce the cover of grass being left over the winter.
Finally, Niamh, what are the top 3 key messages for listeners managing grass in the month ahead?
So the first message is keep animals out grazing for as long as possible, within reason, as every day at grass is worth over €2 per livestock unit. Second message then is to start closing up paddocks next week to ensure adequate grass supply in spring. And third message is then the deadline for spreading farmyard manure is the 1st of November. And now is also a good opportunity to apply lime if required while ground conditions are still good.
That's great, Niamh. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Catherine.
That's all for this week's episode, and further updates from Grass10 and the Beef Edge are available on the Teagasc website at www.teagasc.ie.